Really, really happy to have y'all here today. Um, if y'all are new to the lab, welcome in. This is a community where IT leaders can come to share content, learn from peers, build community, build networking connections, things like that, and basically just talk to each other about IT leadership. IT leadership is not something that I feel like a lot of IT leaders are really trained on. I feel like it's kind of one of those it's kind of a lot of soft skills that when you jump into leadership, you might feel a little bit alone on an island. So hopefully community is here to kind of give you a place to interact with each other and learn from each other. Um, and we also host bi-monthly webinars where we talk about various IT leadership topics and bring on leaders within the space that actually have experience with IT leadership, because I don't, but these folks have plenty. And we bring them on to share their expertise in IT leadership. So I'm going to go ahead and have everybody introduce themselves before we get into the topic of conversation today. And we actually have someone new here today. So Josh, if you want to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you do in IT, how long you've been in here in the IT realm, and what your journeys look like.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm Josh Morden. I'm the IT manager for Evans Incorporated in Falls Church, Virginia. We're just south of DC. And I've been working in IT just actually 11 years last week. And I became an IT manager 8 years ago, and I've been here at this current company for 5 years.
Awesome. Well, really happy to have you on. Appreciate you taking out the time. And look forward to this. Tim, do you want to introduce yourself? I'm sure you've got your intro down memorized now.
Yeah, hold on, let me memorize this. I'm already lost. Hi, everyone. Tim Lanning, VP of IT for SJRC Texas. We're a nonprofit in the San Antonio, Texas region. We are handling child well-being services for now 27 counties around Bexar County. So a lot of remote workers and just a lot of unique needs as a nonprofit. Started out as the IT manager in 2022, and as I lovingly say, Mr. Magooed my way into being VP of IT. A lot of trust placed on me. And I try to reward that with hard work, but it was a lot of challenge and a lot of quick decisions real fast. And here we are. Recently expanded our IT team, doubled in size. So now we have 8 folks on our team. So we have a whole new support side stood up, and then they're rocking and rolling. So just a lot of change and a lot of flexibility. So super awesome.
Yeah, Tim, I wanted to ask, since you just said that you now have eight people in your department, do you have people that are leading those other folks? Okay.
Yes.
So luckily you're not in charge of 8 direct reports.
If you ask right now, there's still some transitions in play like that have to just happen at a certain contractual date, and so that doesn't happen until beginning of September. So technically, if you look at the org chart, they do all report to me, but they absolutely do not. One of my engineers is absolutely just killing it from day one of starting his role, and so we were able to reward him, moving him up to a director role, and he's got the techs, and it's awesome. So
that's great. Yeah. All right, Nate, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now in IT.
Sure. So Nate Payne started in IT, don't laugh, in 1995. My first job was a contract position for a large law firm in the San Francisco Bay Area. And our project was to upgrade hard drives and memory. And at that time, we were upgrading them to 800 megabit hard drives. So that should tell you, that was the upgrade. But I've been in IT for almost 30 years now. I ran an MSP for a number of years, and I spend most of my time now writing and talking and coaching around IT leadership.
Yeah. Let me actually find that TED Talk. He did a TEDx talk. And if y'all missed the stream from a couple of weeks ago. He kind of talked about that. I'll have to find that link while we're chatting, but that is one of his links. But thank y'all so much for being here, and we're gonna kind of jump into our topic of discussion for today, which is planning, road mapping, charting the course for 2026, which sounds wild to think about when it's almost 100 degrees here in Texas. And I can't even imagine what it might feel like in in January. I can't even imagine winter. But now is kind of the best time to start thinking about those things so that you have plenty of time to ramp up, coordinate between various teams and stakeholders, and kind of decide where you can prioritize different tasks, different investments, things like that. So today we'll be talking with these three IT leaders and talk about either how they recommend people plan for their future, what they're actually doing to plan for their future, and how they're kind of juggling it with all of the day-to-day responsibilities as well. Yeah, we generally do not know what winter is. That is correct. Our winter here is, probably 50s, which is not really winter, but
What is snow? We have no clue.
It did
well,
snow in January, though, this year,
that's true. It
in
did.
Houston at least.
Yeah, and I don't, I don't want to jinx it after that one ice storm
Oh, yeah.
that we had. Snow was very cool for about one day, and then suddenly we couldn't get out of our apartment complex. So I'm okay without it, I think. All right. So first question I have is kind of just laying the groundwork. So how do you even begin planning for 2026? If someone is, whether they have a new IT organization or they don't have anything in place right now and are looking to improve that process, what's kind of that first step that someone should take if they are starting from scratch?
I'll run with it.
Go ahead, Nate.
Okay. The first thing, you need to talk with senior leadership, and you need to understand what the goals are for the organization. Sometimes they'll have them formally written, which makes it super easy. Sometimes they don't, and it's in their head. But absolutely, the conversation always starts. I call them global goals, right? Because as IT leaders, we kind of have our goals for our department, but it has to start first with the business goals.
Absolutely. I'll chime in there. I mean, yes, that was the big challenge for me, was coming into this role, was kind of understanding the scope of what I had to deal with. So much of this was unknown to me coming in, because of the nature of the transition that I personally undertook, right? So I think what really helped was taking a step back and absolutely, Nate, looking at what senior leadership has to say. That was invaluable to me, to kind of understand where they wanted to go, but they didn't know really with technology where they wanted to go. My mandate was more figure it out. And so from there, you do have to do that. You have to figure that out. And you can't do that if you don't understand as much as you can about the house that you currently have. Yes, it may be a dumpster, but it's a house. You have to, how do you get it to what it needs to be to align with those goals? I think doing all sorts of assessments, and there are templates in the lab and elsewhere that were kind of invaluable in that. But just to Nate's point, communication with senior leadership. The more conversations you're having, I mean, if you're stepping into something for the first time, that's a great time to ask a lot of stupid questions. If they're not stupid, but ask them. Hey, I'm trying to understand so we get IT off on the right foot. If you're, now several years in, there's still room for dumb questions, right? You should have a better idea of where you're at. But, hey, where are we trying to go? And if you're not in places where you can understand that strategic vision, ask about that. How do I get involved, right? I'm a VP. I'm in certain conversations, but I'm also not in certain conversations. And so it's having those discussions with your leadership. If there's someone more senior than you, hey, I need to make sure that IT is in the room. how can you help me do that? Asking that's going to go a long way. It has in my case anyway. So
Yeah.
I think those are all great. I think the only thing I'll add is just having those relationships with the other department heads is really crucial to be able to have like these kind of conversations like Tim's talking about. The only thing I'll add besides that is just whenever another good tip is when you're in meetings like whole company staff meetings, you really just put like your thinking cap on. And when they're talking about things with their general goal, sometimes it might not necessarily be related to IT, but there's something that IT can do to support that or to make it better. And so if you're trying to be innovative and thinking about that as you're hearing these things, that can give you something that you can take to them and say, hey, here's what you might be able to do. We can pivot in this way to help us with the IT and make to succeed in those goals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you make sure that your actions are aligned with business goals? And I think, Nate, this was something that you had shared. You kind of shared a resource on the actual planning process. Would you mind kind of showing that and going through
Yeah.
that flow chart?
Find it here. Okay, can everyone see this?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So this is kind of talking to what Tim and Josh were saying earlier. This is literally like 20 years hard fought lesson to get to this flow, I call it. So it starts at the top. These are the goals. And two of these goals in here are literally from a former client. So this is the conversation I'm going to have, and these are literally the questions I'm asking. What are the goals over the next 1 to 3, 3 to 5, whatever that window is that the organization uses? Now, right now, I'm just talking to senior leadership, right, like C-level. But this is the same conversation and the same mapping that I would do when I'm talking to business unit leaders as well. To Josh's point, kind of having those conversations to know where we fit in. So the most important question, here's the goal. They want to increase revenue by 20% over 3 years. My question to them is, how are we going to do that? And those become what is usually called initiatives or objectives or something, whatever terminology. And then I map those out, right? So in this particular example, they're going to open 10 new retail stores. They're going to launch 2 new products. And one of the first things we see is that the initiatives sometimes support more than one goal. And so we also want to map that, right? So launch 2 new products is also supporting their goal of growing market share. Here's the single most important thing that I learned. The question becomes, on a scale of 1 to 5, how important is this initiative, opening these stores, launching 2 new products, how important is it to the success of this goal? This sets us up for the rest of everything that we do. Because there's this thing called the law of correspondence, right? As above, so below. So meaning, if this initiative, opening the 10 new stores, is a 5, which is like critical to the success of this goal, then that means everything connected to it is also a 5, and it's also critical. So the only thing that we need to determine is just really how critical. And so the next thing I look at, and this is, I think Josh talked about this, and so did Tim, I need to understand IT's contribution to this initiative. What do you need from us? And then what role do we play? And I actually quantify this percentage-wise, right? We make up 25%. We contribute 25% to the overall success of this initiative, whatever the case is, but you have to quantify it. And then after I understand what my contribution is, and I think Tim talked about this too, then we just assess our capabilities. Where are we? Right. And so whatever frameworks you want to use to do that's fine. Sometimes you'll have some capabilities in place. They just need to be enhanced. Sometimes you don't have the capability at all, and those kind of turn into projects. But again, I score myself on my capability to deliver what this initiative requires from IT. And it's from those assessments, and as they roll up to support the initiative and then ultimately the goal, those things then get added to my budget.
Mhm.
And so the really cool part about this is that when they get to the budget and they start reading this line item, oh, we need new this, or we want to add whatever to the budget, you can trace it all the way back. Well, it supports a capability that supports an initiative that supports this goal. And there's a direct line or roll up back to that. So this is the model that I use. It's politics, bias, favoritism, all of that goes out of the window when you can show them a map of what's important to them, what that means to IT, and how you've responded to it, and then ultimately the choice is theirs after that.
Yeah, that's great. I'm curious how you actually take this flow and how do you use this? Do you have them like make their own chart usually, or is it a matter of taking whatever is laid out here and putting it into another tool, or how does that look like?
Yeah, good question. So two answers. One, this is a conversation, right? This is to make sure that when I leave that conversation with that leader, I have the answers to these questions, that I understand. I understand how important this initiative is to whatever goal it's connected to. And I also understand what they need from IT. What do you need us to do, right? So if HR is involved, right, because we're opening 10 new stores, obviously HR is going to have to do some hiring. How well positioned are they to do that? Does that involve new software, new capabilities? Is IT exposed to that? So it's really that my conversation flows from this model in terms of the questions that I ask. So it just makes the conversations more productive in that sense, and I'm just filling in the blanks after the meetings. In answer to the second question, there's some math that goes on behind the scenes here in terms of the quantification. The reason we're asking for numbers is because we need to perform calculations. And I'm actually building the tool that allows that to happen. We're still kind of working on that, but it can be done in Excel with formulas as well, because it's presenting to them that based upon the goal, the importance of this initiative, your dependency on IT for that particular initiative, and our current capability, this is what we should do. And it's just clean. It's no storytelling. You don't necessarily have to be an extrovert or charming or whatever the case is. The numbers speak for themselves. And this has cut through all of the BS, excuse my language, that I lived with for years by presenting it to senior leadership in this way.
Yeah. No, I think this is great. I mean, it definitely lays things out, and there's a lot of bias and stuff that goes into IT decisions. And
I'll upload this later as well if anybody's interested. So.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that would be great. Tim, Josh, do you have any thoughts on how you kind of work with other teams to connect business goals?
Right. I think in a similar vein to what Nate's doing, I haven't done anything near as formalized, but I definitely think you kind of have to approach it from two tiers. And really it depends on your role in your organization, right? If there's IT leadership above you, this may not necessarily be your purview, but maybe you're being asked to do it, or you just keep in mind where you're at in the strata, right? And you should have if you have a senior leadership, like you have a VP of IT, and my director, comes to me and says, "Hey, I want to do this." I have a choice to make. Do I take that on? I think that's a great idea. I'll do it, or I say, "No, I trust you. Go do the legwork for me." That's a conversation to be had. And as a upper management leader, like a VP, I should be willing to hear ideas from my people. Anyway, rolling back the rabbit trail. This conversation along the lines of what Nate has laid out, in my opinion, and what's worked for me, is having two sets of conversations. You definitely do have the senior leadership conversation with exactly like this flow chart that Nate laid out would be perfect. And I think is a very good framework for a high level strategic goals on down. But then I think you can do a very similar framework department by department, because they're going to be having pieces that may or may not correlate to the organization's strategic goals, but you may still have to support them or now you know something that you need to go tell somebody else because like they're over here doing their own thing that doesn't align. Hey, I'm just the messenger, don't shoot me. But very similar framework there. You can have, and you can say, well, HR wants to roll out a new HRIS system. Okay, well, I can see how that connects to the strategic goal up here, but more importantly, this is its own little like strategic goal that now needs all that framework too, and it's only tangentially applied to a strategic goal, right? So I think value in having those conversations department by department would be huge, because then you're building rapport automatically, but also you're coming to them with the same framework. And if they see that, oh, senior leadership is getting the same thing, I'm getting it at my level, it's goodwill, right? Like you are treating them as valued partners in running this organization. So I'll stop talking now, but that's honestly what I intend to do this budget cycle. And Nate, you just gave me a massive advantage in that. So thank you for the framework. But that's my intention to seriously do this now that I'm out of reactive mode a little bit more and able to be more proactive. This is critical.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say is that I think something that was really interesting Nate mentioned in his chart was that there's lots of times practical things that you do that can that are part of meeting multiple goals. So it's not everything is just a totally linear process. And so I think having that communication across departments to make sure that there's like awareness of that, particularly at the top level, whether it's like your CEO. In my situation, I report directly to one of the two owners of the company, so that really helps with that. But just having that communication to make sure, and when you're approaching the actual getting into the weeds of rolling things out, thinking about how to make it future-proof, so that like lots of times there's, whether it's a technology or a process, that can be reused for other things that may come up that you may not even be aware of today. But if you try your best to do that, that helps you to be more agile as things shift in the business.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I can just touch on what both Tim and Josh said, that's absolutely right, Tim. This is something that a framework that you use with each department. And we've had conversations on this before when I said, it's not your fight, right? So what happens if HR wants a new HRIS system and marketing wants a new CRM? And they're both bringing you donuts and coffee and they're buttering you up. You know what I'm saying? And so how do you make that decision? Well, again, the numbers speak for me. Which one has the greater contribution to the initiative that supports the goal? And it's not my fight. At that point, it's for somebody above my level to say, oh, yeah, we can't do both. Or we can say, you know what, how we can do both? You give me more headcount. We grow the budget a little bit. What do you guys want to do? Should we grow the budget? Should we just make a trade-off or pick one over the other? It's not my decision to make. And sometimes I think as IT leaders, we get kind of caught in between. And I needed a way to free myself from being caught in the middle. And so, yes, to your point, absolutely. This is a conversation starter, framework, whatever you want to call it, for each department. And it creates a sense of transparency between departments. Because I think Josh mentioned this too. It's like you kind of get to see, oh, well, if I do this one thing, I'm actually affecting 4 things. Oh, why don't we spend our money on this if all things are being, are equal? So, yeah, anyway, I just wanted to say that those are very good insights.
Yeah, it's funny. That was actually one of my next follow-up questions was how do you, no, you're fine. I think that was a great lead into to that question. How do you handle those disparate needs? As Nate said, it's not your fight, like if HR and marketing and sales all want something different, then, that's not a decision that you need to make. But how do you basically take that and tell all of those teams you need to sort out that? because that's a difficult conversation to have too.
Yes.
But if you're going through this process with everybody and you're a process, I mean, take this framework. This is a great way, and I would be a major proponent of it. But whatever framework you choose, right? If you're coming at it with this perspective that we're kind of laying out here, you, without really trying too hard, you are helping see those conflict points or helping see those alignments, right? Ideally, more alignments than conflict points. And then you've provided a data-driven answer to those things. And senior leadership's going to see that and be like, oh, cool. Okay, easy. Or not easy. Oh, we have a major problem, but thanks IT for telling us. Here's a raise, ideally. Won't happen in my case, but it's fine. Anyway, yeah, no, I think that's the biggest thing is just you're facilitating that process while not getting involved.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I think also what that is doing is just creating transparency. So when everyone, at least in our company, one thing that's nice here is that everybody understands that we're trying to succeed in whatever goals we have. So let's say if you end up in a situation where, to use the example of HR, if they want to replace our HRM system with something else, but then we realize that that's not where we need to be focusing on. Usually people, they tend to be understanding. They're like, well, I wish we could have it, but I can see, I have a full understanding of what the goal is. And so that's fine. So I think having that transparency, which can help with navigating those challenges might come up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So for y'all that are actually, you might be managing IT organizations, you might be helping people manage IT organizations. What are some examples of your kind of goals for 2026 as you started kind of potentially putting together a roadmap or are in the beginnings of kind of building out that structure? What does that look like, and what are some examples of goals that y'all have?
Well, a lot of mine are, because I mentioned we're a nonprofit that's handling child well-being. We are undertaking a contract to bring on 400 more employees in March. So my 2026 roadmap is very front-loaded right now, and a lot of uncertainty on the other side of that. And so that's where you have items in the pocket to put on the roadmap, but know that they may or may not happen. And I think there's also an undercurrent here that we're talking about prioritization of things, because those things that I have in my pocket that I'm trying to look beyond March and it's all fog. What's going to be the most important things to get done if I can, right? Like if we have budget, we're dealing with a state entity. So like, do we have the budget is a conversation sometimes. But a lot of mine is predicated on that contract. And so there's a lot of necessities even there. I mean, if that's the big goal is grow by 400 employees, right? I have all of my project roadmap items for honestly an entire year's worth of work that I have to get done between now and March. So there's things that have to go into the roadmap and things that have to go into the budget to support that need. And that is the lion's share of what we're doing. But there's things like refreshing our ancient network that I'm going to take another stab at getting into the budget. There's some cybersecurity supplemental tools. There's building out an entire data lake infrastructure for our organization's data, and allowing AI and Power BI to kind of swim in that lake, facilitating all that. Those are all kind of on the roadmap, all predicated on contract going well, everything going good, and I see no reason why I can't. But it's a funding question, and you sort your priorities. And honestly, if we don't do the data lake, it hampers some, really cool things we want to do, but the business doesn't fold. So that's things like that. I mean, just speaking honestly, in my case, a lot of it is this big contract thing, and maybe that's similar for some folks, that you have something that's a non-negotiable. You didn't get any choice. This is what the organization's doing, and you have to support that goal, and that's taking 50% of your manpower, your budget, all these things. You have to take that. You can't you can't avoid that. You can whine about it. I have, but it doesn't help, turns out.
Yeah, there are definitely some, keep the lights on things that you have to do that always have to be part of that, of those goals, and balancing between what you want to do, new things that you want to implement, whatever it is, it can definitely be hard to balance all of that. Nate, I don't know if you've been working with anybody on building out those goals for the next year.
Yeah, I wanted to speak to Tim's point because, like Tim, I used to work for a large nonprofit, and some of those challenges that you have. This is where you switch hats, right? And you sort of go from being a tech to being like that strategic advisor. And some of it is just having the conversations like he mentioned, right? So I'm front loaded, and it's all depending on budget. We don't know how this is going to go. We had to spend money by a certain time. We had to hit certain marks, right? Otherwise we lose the funding. We had things like that. But those are the kind of conversations you can have when it's different, because now I'm that advisor to senior leadership or to the business unit leadership to say, here's what we're looking at, right? And then making those tough decisions. That's why we ask 1 to 5 on those initiatives. That's the prioritization of that initiative. So in the old days, we literally, don't laugh again, but we used to print our budget and our plan every year. It was pretty. It was like 4-color and all this stuff. And it would change. And 6 months later, it's sitting on the IT director's shelf. It's dusty, right? And you get a new CFO, and you say, "Where's your IT plan?" And you kind of, here it is, kind of thing. Life is not like that anymore. So what's cool about having everything quantified is that things change, right? From all levels, our capabilities change, priorities change, and when they change, if you kind of quantified everything, it just ripples up and down. Right? And just says, oh, okay, well, these numbers change now because the priority changed, right? Or what they want from us changed, or the dates changed. And it just flows through and allows you now to be a lot more agile, as Josh mentioned earlier. So that, to me, is the most important thing, is switching those hats and having those strategic conversations. You cannot do everything, and it's really not your decision. Right? If you think about like the president just has advisors. He doesn't know all about everything. And so you are an advisor, and you come in there, and the more clearly you can present the business case, not even necessarily a recommendation, just here's where we are, here's the situation. The more clear you can be about that, the more they're going to value and appreciate you as a leader, and see you beyond just being a break fix person.
Sure. Yeah.
No, I have nothing to add. That was perfectly laid out, Nate.
Thanks. Yeah. Nate is known for perfectly laid out advice. So. Yeah. So I guess switching gears a little bit to actually the practical planning of it. Sorry, I know my dog is she came up as I was talking. I was like, stop. The joys of working remotely. So if you're going to start making this plan, what specific platforms or tools do you actually use to do this? Whether is it a spreadsheet, is it a specific tool, is it a productivity tool? I live and die by Asana, so like that's where I put basically everything. Are there any specific tools that you recommend for people to check out?
Well, I'll say one of the things that I've kind of learned over just more broadly in my experience is that being the whole system integrator kind of thing is fun when you're like, because it's fun to try out new tools. But the more cookie cutter that you can be, that makes your life a lot easier. And so for a lot of us, I know we're Microsoft shops. And then there's a lot of value that you can get from that Microsoft 365 license, including Microsoft Planner, which is included in it. So my suggestion is always just in any case, whether it's you're looking for a project planning tool or otherwise, is to start with what you have and try that first. And so we use Planner a lot for IT planning. We have a link to our ticketing system. It's a really robust tool, and it supports collaborations. We can share it with other people. So that would be, I think, a good place to start. That's probably easily accessible for a lot of people on this call.
Right, and I'll actually link it in the chat here, but Obsidian, the note-taking tool, has been recommended multiple times, right? Like I actually picked it up from here and have just run with it. I adore it. I drive everyone on my team crazy because they're like, I have to go check Obsidian for this. Like, yes, you do. It's in there. The canvas functionality is perfect to just like throw things. Like you feel like Tony Stark, like in his shop, just throwing things out there. I'm looking at my project dashboard that kind of serves as my like actual working document for my roadmap. And it's just, I have it broken down certain ways. Like this would be similar to a spreadsheet, but it's nice to be able to draw lines from box to box. That's what the Canvas functionality provides, and kind of a flow charting tool in that regard, but a little more, it's unique. Anyway, I'll stop shilling Obsidian. It is free. But that's been super helpful for me to be able to just take my brain and try to throw it onto something, and it does nothing. It does something that a spreadsheet can't do for my brain. And that's probably like between Obsidian and a therapist, I might have all my problems solved. So.
Yeah. Well, spreadsheets, Excel, PowerPoint. That's kind of where I started. Jira, and like you, Brittany, Asana, and which is great, but it's like 4 tools, right?
Yeah.
And so it got to a point where, like, sort of the discussions that we're having now, I couldn't really like link them in such a way to do kind of like what Tim's saying. I want to be able to hit a button, and I want to see how it impacts everything, right? And whether that's changing a budget item or completing a task in a project or upgrading something and completing an assessment question, I wanted to see. So it's not perfect yet, but I'm using my own tool that takes the project management and the budgeting and the planning and the goals and everything and puts it in one thing so that you can just see everything. When I push a button here, what happens? I think it was you, Josh, that said something about the non-linear, right, aspect of things. That's crucial, because sometimes you do something over here and you didn't realize, oh, well, this is connected to something that HR wanted. This is connected to something that senior leadership wanted. It's connected to something manufacturing wanted. And you have no idea how it's going to impact people. And it won't be in the same way because it had a different priority in terms of their initiative that it supported. So, but in the meantime, I think Excel did okay until my formulas got like this big, and the formulas were literally larger than what the answer was, and I said, okay, we have to do something.
Yeah, I've never really learned how to use Excel like a professional. I copy and paste from a lot of things. I can do sum. I could do minus. That's about it, though. It's about as
AI now, right? So it's really...
That's true. Yeah. At some point, maybe I don't need to. Maybe I don't need to learn it. But yeah, it definitely is hard whenever you have all of these things that you need to know in a bunch of different systems. And I think that's something that my team is actually struggling with right now. Is we have documents here in OneDrive, and we have old deprecated Google Sheets, and we have Word docs, and we have Asana where we're actually tracking things, and we have our own documents on our desktops, and all of this stuff it's all over the place. So right now we're actually dealing with that, where we're trying to sit there and actually organize all of our stuff. I really like that
That's funny.
that meme about Excel. I need to find this. There's a very funny SharePoint meme too that a coworker shared the other day that I really, really liked. Let's see if I can copy it in here, but yeah. I think maybe I should just plan a stream where I just have everyone bring their best memes and just sit here.
That sounds like an April 1st.
That does sound
yeah.
like it. Wow, that actually is a very good April 1st stream idea. If only it weren't
go ahead and
but...
sign me up. I'll outsource my entire team to collating memes between now and then. No,
yeah, everybody could vote on their favorites. Yeah. So we're struggling with the same thing of actually just trying to keep all of those things together when we all, even within our team of 3 people, we all have different goals and projects that we're working on. So definitely trying to measure that.
Well, I think the challenge too, and probably everybody on here understands, right? Because there's 2 views. There's what we used to call the 30,000-foot view, which is the strategy, the goals, right? And then it's like the in the weeds stuff, and it's really still all one big thing. And so one tool will be really great for this piece of the view, but this perspective, it doesn't work so well. And so you're trying to cobble these different views together in some way that makes sense, but they don't really talk to each other. And it makes it a little bit difficult just to make that jump. So that's definitely a goal moving forward.
Mm-hmm. And then part of actually planning goals and everything is measuring performance. I'm not sure if y'all are to that point yet where you have actual metrics that you want to measure, but is there a way that you do measure performance over time? And how do you measure those goals and keep track of all that stuff?
I think first of all, if depending on your personnel, right, and what your roadmap is, I think functionally asking, did this actually provide value when it's done, right? Is it done? Number one, I think I would argue is it's a persuasive metric. Number 2, did it provide value to folks? The anticipated value, because yes, HR wants their new HRIS system, but did they pick something stupid, right? Like, or did it not implement well? We ran into a whole bunch of challenges and had to can the whole thing. Okay, then it didn't really provide value. That's more what I'm after. In full transparency, I mentioned I'm going from reactive to proactive IT. I'm just now being able to kind of sort out, okay, what metrics am I holding my team to now that we're not the dumpster fire response team as much anymore? So if you're still there, I get it. Just focus on what we talked about at the beginning. What can you do to provide value in alignment with the strategic goals of the organization? If you're plugged into those conversations and you have your finger on the pulse there, you should be able to pretty clearly see the thread through there of, oh, hey, having our ticket count average go from 20 to like 5 is providing value, because that means that fewer people are not working as hard, right? And that's outside of scope of roadmap. But these big projects that have to happen, like a network refresh, hey, we provided value by or architecting the entire network and not having an arbitrary cap on the amount of clients that we can have at this network. I'm not dealing with that at all right now. Don't worry about it. Anyway, I think your metrics can be as simple as they need to be, as long as you're genuinely focused on providing value.
Mm-hmm.
I think the metrics too are sort of multi-layered, where I like OKRs. That's kind of my thing. What are we trying to do? What does good and finished and successful look like? I need a number. I need a percentage. I need something, and then I need a time frame, right? Because the time frame is incredibly important, right? So if this objective or this initiative is a 5, but it's due in 12 months, and this one is a 4, but it's due in 9 months. Which one should I work on first, right? So to me, the numbers tell me everything to do. So I like the OKRs because I'm pulling quantifiable data that I use later to help me make decisions. But then there's also like just from an IT department, right? And kind of like what Tim was saying, it's like, right, how fast are we closing tickets, right? Maybe how few reopens, right? So we're closing them fast, but goodness, 20% of them, people are calling back and saying that wasn't the fix, and now we're reopening tickets. Are we hitting our marks in terms of project completion? So, I mean, I think they change over time. I kind of like to use them as a motivating tool, like an aspiration for the team, especially in areas where I find that maybe we're lacking a little bit. But those will be separate from what, again, when we started this whole conversation, is that globally, that's my North Star. Is the metrics that they set before me. And that's why I specifically ask the questions in a way that they can respond to me in an OKR, because then I can actually do something with that kind of answer.
Mm-hmm.
I think from my side, because might be a little different from Tim and Nate, because I'm a one-man show IT manager here at this company. So, but we do have an MSP, and one other metric I would add that's really important to us is first contact resolution. And I think that's because, again, as we've been talking about, when people's computer is down, that's time that they're not. That's not time they're not working, and as a federal contractor, that's time that then they're not billing. So it's not going towards utilization. So trying to minimize that time is, and so we track that in a quarterly meeting with the MSP and say, how can we get that first contact resolution time down so that people, the first time they call, that dispatch is able to give it to the right person and they can solve it and have people get on their way. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think that's an awesome example because it's tied directly to revenue. Right. So it's not hard to make that connection to say, okay, our goal is this. And then to say, every 15 minutes, I don't know what the contract looks like, but if you're just going hourly, I can't charge. I can actually put that into dollars and cents and saying, if we reduce your first contact resolution to this certain point, that equals $40,000 annually. I mean, that's a big win. And just back to the point of being able to quantify, to put into dollars or some number that matters to senior leadership. So yeah, I think that's a great example of using a metric in a way to have a very, how can I say, consultative kind of conversation in terms of budgeting with senior leadership.
Yeah, I definitely think that like coming to senior leadership with actual numbers is huge in making those kinds of business cases. And the last thing I wanted to discuss was looking back at 2025, even though we're still in 2025, whenever you were planning for 2025, what are some of the lessons that you learned from last year's planning and how it's going this year? And how are you applying that to 2026 planning?
That's an interesting question.
I stumped a Burton.
For 2025, a lot of this was, again, slightly out of our hands. Contracts that we're dealing with right now were supposed to come into effect very early in the year, and that process was delayed enough to where it's seriously impacted us and pushed us into 2026. We were supposed to be done with this whole transition by the end of this year. And so what that meant is, yes, some projects got pushed to 2026. Yay. That freed up bandwidth. Yay. But it didn't, because now we don't have things that we wanted in 2025. And so I put a bunch of ambitious stuff on our budget because I was intending for us to actually have, final contract executed and some surplus funding that could go to these things that we had conversations about. And so just due to that, a lot of my stuff that didn't that ended up, we wanted to happen, didn't end up happening. And so I think that's really a lesson learned, is having more conversations, like I've mentioned, I think is going to be huge this time around, because it's almost a blessing in disguise that we didn't do these major things, because we had a whole bunch of housekeeping to do, that cropped up. And so if I'd had these conversations in 2025 budget, I might have been able to capture some other items that were impactful, some other conversations that were happening in preparation for 2025 budget that actively kind of screwed me out of budget funding. Anyway, have those conversations, I think, is a big lesson learned. And I think part of that was, it was my first year really being able to do it, didn't learn lessons. So until now I know everything.
Yeah, no, I think Tim made a great point about more communication. That's probably what I would add too. We had one incident earlier this year where there was something related to one of our contracts that was dropped on us last minute, and fortunately we were able to pivot things around and meet it. But I think two things I would do differently, I think is good advice for planning, is just, again, have more conversation, have as clear of an understanding as you can of what's coming up for the next 12 months. And then also trying to build in, like, breaking down your project by quarter and trying to build in buffer space so that when those things inevitably come up, you have that room to be able to pivot, move things around, and not get crunched. So those would be two things I've learned I'll be doing for next year.
Yeah, those are all good points. The biggest one is just understanding the ripple effects of that decision. And if you map it, it just makes everything easier. Simpler, not easier. But meaning that if we have to pull back, right, like Josh says, if something happened, we don't get the funding, right, Tim? Like we thought that, right, the check would come, it didn't come. We had a project that we used to do with the military, and if you've ever worked with the military in terms of getting paid, sometimes it's a little slow, and right, they were kind of behind a quarter or two, 30 sometimes, and so that would impact things moving forward. So and that's fine, that's just business, that's life, right? Man plans, God laughs, right? We get it. But having that cushion, I think, is incredibly important. But you better understand when you're in that, and I have to make a decision, do we go here, don't go here? What does that mean? Because sometimes if we're only thinking in a straight line, like Josh said earlier, we miss it. So that's where I think in the beginning, really mapping what I call the relationships, the dependencies, the degree of dependencies. It doesn't save you, but I think it helps you make tough decisions, more informed when to crunch it, because the time to do it isn't like when that moment hits, it's too late then, right?
Yeah. Well, it sounds like there's a lot of lessons to be learned from kind of past experiences and building out roadmaps. But I think those are all the questions I had. Are there any kind of last minute things that maybe weren't brought up? Any kind of last minute bits of advice that you have that maybe we didn't cover?
I'll tell everybody, quantify it. I mean, it's CYA. If anybody's been in IT, you guys know what I'm talking about, because when it goes bad, they're going to blame you. Okay. So the question is, I know it's important to the business, and this is what everything you read, they say you need to know what matters to the business. And that's true. But what's more important, you need to know how much it matters. Mm-hmm. Right? Oh, this is very important. That doesn't help me. On a scale of 1 to 5, what does it mean to you? It's a 4. Oh, okay. Because very important, maybe I mark it as a 5, and that totally changes the way I would plan and respond to that conversation. So that would be my takeaway. On a scale of 1 to 5, what does this mean to you? And then that helps you stand on solid footing, because when you have to come back and say, well, why is this here? Or why does this cost so much? Or why are you guys doing this instead of this? I say, well, this is connected to this. You said this was a 5. This is a 3. We went with the 5. Were we wrong? CYA.
Communicate. Over communicate. You can never, in my opinion, communicate too much. although my wife would say otherwise probably. But to Nate's point, you have the data, communicate it. You're gonna automatically look like an expert, even if you feel like you're not. But also the fact that you're gathering data means that you're doing better than quite a few people. So just try to think holistically and communicate on things. I know that's easy to say here without knowing the intricacies of what everyone's doing, but for me, I mean, it's keeping in mind the mission and vision and just doing what we can to support that. And if that means putting my ego in check a little bit, or maybe I'm a little more patient on some things than, I maybe should, okay, it's not the end of the world. Don't sweat the small stuff. So.
And I would say just be confident and not shy away from the difficult conversations, which may come up even in some of the things we've talked about. Just remember that, as the IT leader, the companies, we're leaning on you as the subject matter expert. And so, don't be afraid to show your recommendation and to speak when it's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that it's, from what I've noticed in my years of working with IT pros, is that the imposter syndrome is a very real thing. And, I think, to your point, it's a really, really good idea to be confident and have those discussions and know that you got where you are because you know a lot, and you know probably more about each part of the business than a lot of people do. And, you are definitely more than capable of having those conversations. So, really, really great note to end on. So thank you so much. All right. Well, I think we're right at time. Well, almost right at time. But thank y'all again for joining. Really appreciate you being part of the panel. Thank you everybody that was able to join and chat as well. We will have this recording up. I'm going to try to get the wrap up done by today. I know sometimes I'm a little bit late, but hopefully I can get it done by today. And we'll kind of include all of the relevant links and things that we discussed here, and kind of get you a wrap up in the community, so you have a handle on all of that. I also wanted to mention we are starting up these small group cohorts, kind of testing the waters, seeing if people are interested in being in a smaller group and being able to communicate with each other in a small group. I know sometimes it can be intimidating to go into the community and ask a bunch of questions and share things. So we're kind of testing the idea of small groups. So if you are interested in something like that, definitely fill out the form with your information, and we'd love to get you in that first pass through. And then we will be back in a couple of weeks, and we'll be talking about IT tools. So what IT tools IT leaders are using to make their days a little bit more efficient, run a little bit more smoothly. So yeah, and that's it for me. And if you should make this sign to the small group, you can if you want. It's a good way to kick off a conversation. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, thank you all again so much. Really appreciate you being on today. And yeah, we'll catch you in a couple weeks for the next stream.
Thanks, Brittany, for hosting as always.